So the left has come out with a new narrative to try and attack President Trump with, and you know what? It's probably one of the lamest narratives that they have ever come up with. And maybe you've heard about this narrative. As Business Insider reports, the Trump administration declined to use an Obama-era pandemic preparedness playbook. Politico reports. The Trump administration declined to use a nearly 70-page pandemic preparedness playbook created by the National Security Council's Health Unit during the Obama administration in favor of other preparedness materials. Okay, so this is one of the lamest things that the media has ever come up with. And it's one of those things where you think, okay, you know what? We are now at a point where the media has tried using up everything that they can. And so now they're just out of good ideas. They're out of good attack lines. And that's what this is about. Because let's take a look at this. We're not talking about a law here, that the administration has to enforce. We're talking about a playbook. Every president has a completely different playbook. And when we vote for a president, let's say the prior administration was a Democrat and we vote for a Republican, it's because we're looking for a different playbook to go by, because we don't like the direction that the current playbook is taking us. And oh yeah, by the way, Obama didn't use the playbook either. Apparently this is a playbook that was developed after Ebola, right? After Ebola. But even at that, there are some huge problems with this. First off, did anybody attack Obama for not using the Bush-era playbooks on anything, right? No, nobody attacked that. Why? Because we understand that different administrations have different playbooks and pursue different policies in different ways, right? We don't go off and say, hey, we want change. But don't you dare change the playbook that you use. We want change, but we want you to do everything exactly the same. And let's face it, Obama's playbook for the economy was horrible. Why would we trust the playbook here? But in any event, there are other problems and issues with this particular narrative. Besides the fact that Obama didn't even use the playbook anyways, is the fact that the playbook couldn't be used. Right? There wouldn't be a way to actually use the Obama-era playbook, and probably for a very simple reason, such as this. As the Blaze reports, Obama administration used up stockpile of N95 masks, but never replenished the supply, despite recommendations to do so. So here is another problem with the media's narrative, is that the Obama administration playbook kind of required that you had supplies to begin with. And Obama depleted the supplies, never restocked them. So how can you use a playbook that is kind of dependent upon you having a stockpile of supplies to begin with, if the supplies were never stockpiled to begin with? And Obama never did that, right? He didn't. And this is a factual case. So they're going off trying to attack Trump for not using Obama's playbook when Obama's playbook was rendered useless by the fact that there wasn't a stockpile. Now you can go off and try and say Trump should have known to check for everything throughout the government. There is no way one person can ever, inspect the entire government and make sure that everything is in place. You kind of get the leaders, and the leaders are there to try and, monitor stuff. And, throughout the organization, there's a reason there's a hierarchy, and Trump gets the overview of everything that's going on in government. Now, besides the fact that there wasn't an actual stockpile with which to enact the playbook from a president whose playbooks generally sucked, I wanted to say something else there for a moment. There are other problems with this. Mainly, one of the parts of the playbook says he should have been stocking up on supplies back in January. Well, Trump was taking actions back in January, but where do we get our stockpiles from? Where do all of our manufacturing generally come from, or most of our manufacturing for pharmaceutical masks, hand sanitizers, and the like? Oh yes, China. That's right. And what was going on, back in January? Oh yes, China was dealing with the initial outbreak. And so they're going through and trying to say he didn't use the playbook, right? Then they're going off and trying to, downplay the fact that the playbook required a stockpile and we didn't have a stockpile. Then they want to go, well, he should have known and he should have been stockpiling. But then where do we get our stockpiles from? And they want to ignore that that was at the heart of where the pandemic started with to begin with, right? And so let's say we would have been stockpiling on it. What would have happened? You would have had a bunch of people in China who were probably infected, creating the mask, infecting the surfaces, and then shipping that here? Or do you think China was maybe saying manufacturing for other countries takes a back seat to China manufacturing the medical equipment that they need for themselves, considering that China was in the middle of the outbreak at that particular time, right? You're starting to see a problem here, and this is why Trump was saying, hey, we need to bring manufacturing back to the United States, to which the left mocked him for it, and now we're finding out the critical need. But even at that, there are other holes and problems in the left wing's narrative about all of this, such as this report from the Blaze. China is supplying masks that don't work, and countries all over the world are using them. And throughout this, it goes off and says about 80% of the masks produced in China to deal with the coronavirus, the N95 respirator mask, have severe manufacturing flaws that render them basically useless. Okay, so let's review the Obama playbook. Okay, first of all, it was created by a president whose playbook failed at everything. Check. Secondly, we have a different president who, because we wanted a change in direction, policy, and playbooks, has a different playbook. Okay. No one criticized Obama for not using Bush's playbook. Okay. They're saying that Trump should have been stockpiling, back in January, and stockpiling enough to overcompensate for the fact that Obama failed to restock the masks after Ebola and the N1H1. All right. So, and then we're supposed to get our stockpile from China, while one, they were the country at the center of the outbreak, and two, their current manufacturing is flawed and rendering these masks, much like their tests, almost completely useless. All right, so you're starting to see why this attack about not using the Obama playbook is a completely useless attack, is just designed to be nothing more than a distraction, a way to try and generate public perception to blame Trump for the failures of left-wing politics. And left-wing politics is communism, authoritarianism, socialism. Left-wing politics brought us, globally, the Nazis, and in the States, the KKK, all of that. That's left-wing politics. But because Trump doesn't follow left-wing politics, everything must be demanded to be his fault, despite the complete failures showing to be that of the Democrats. Are we even surprised, though? Are we even surprised that the Democrats are trying to distract the nation from a crisis in order to develop a political narrative that has no basis in truth? Right? I mean, we could keep calling out the media over how despicable their actions and conduct is, but they have no shame. So it gets to be about, what's the point? You're just going to be banging your head up against the wall against a group of people that just keep talking and talking without shame, and then they switch the narrative, based off of what's convenient at the time. First, Trump was taking too drastic action and was xenophobic. Then he's not taking enough action. He's not using the playbook. Oh, but the playbook would have been damaging. And yeah, I mean, we keep coming across this. But the point is, when it comes down to it, not only is this a completely meaningless attack, but even if we wanted to follow a playbook from Obama, it wouldn't have been feasible during this time because of the major screw-ups by the Obama administration and the problems with manufacturing being located in China and their cheap quality, right? Their cheap lack of quality. So when you go through and you start seeing more and more of these attacks developing, actually take a look at them, analyze them, and try and wonder, what's the actual truth? What is the flaw in the narrative? Because there's always a flaw in the left-wing narrative because there are a bunch of unprincipled hacks.